Hello, this is Noreen Crone-Findlay from Crone-Findlay.com and toddytalkscrafts.com. This is my second video tutorial on working with the Lucet and how to make cords that have buttons, beads, and charms added to them when you're working with the Lucet. Now the Lucet that I use is one that I designed. It's a small, held in the hand one. Many Lucets are larger and have a handle, but I really like the small compact size. So this is a great way of making friendship bracelets, wrapped bracelets that have beads and buttons and charms and things. Very simple and really fun to make too. And you can add buttons, beads, and charms, not just to bracelets, but to any luceted cord that you want to use in any way that you're going to be making embellishments and other wonderful things with your cords. Jewelry, of course. And my URLs are Crone-Findlay.com, toddytalkscrafts.com, YouTube, well, you're already here. And my patterns can be ordered from Etsy. So there's my Etsy URL. And when you go to Etsy, you'll find my Etsy store, there are a ton of spool knitted patterns, and they can all be used with your Lucet cords. So definitely check the spool knitting patterns out in my Etsy shop. You can follow me on Facebook by going to Noreen Crone-Findlay Designs. So let's get embellishing. My favorite way to add beads, buttons, and charms to Lucet cord is to use a crochet hook that's got a very fine tip on it so that it will fit through the hole in the bead or the button or the charm. And to use at least one thread that is going to be fine enough that it will fit through the hole when I pull it through the bead or the button or the charm. So I'm going to use a ribbon type yarn and one strand of crochet cotton held together really, just held together as if they were one yarn. And so what I'll do is I will use my crochet hook as the loop lifter, and I need to make sure that I am lifting both the fine yarn and the thicker yarn. Whoops, I just pulled it right off. That I'm lifting both of them at the same time because I don't want one of them to get left behind. So after the cord is made, I'm going to make a bracelet right now, a wraparound bracelet. After the cord is made, this bead has a thick enough hole in it, a big enough hole, that it can actually be pulled onto the cord, the complete cord. And so I'll do that at the very end. So I'm going to just work a couple of stitches. And I'm going in through the center and then pulling up. So now what I'm going to do is I've brought my yarn across to the front, and I'm going to take my crochet hook and I will insert it into a little bead, and I'll put the bead, this one is not that little, but let's start with a smaller one. Here we go. So I'm just picking the beads up out of a tin here. Get my threads disconnected. So I've put the bead onto the hook. Now what I'm going to do is I'll take this back down behind, and I'm just going to pick up the thin thread and pull a loop of that through Then I will pop that onto the left hand prong or peg, and then that thin thread will go in front of the right hand one. And now the thick thread comes across both of them. And I just lift my lower loop over my upper loop just as normal. And the bead is now there in the center. And I can pull up my thinner thread to make sure that that's secure there. And I will work 2 more stitches. And that bead's quite small, so it's kind of getting lost. It will emerge afterwards. It'll pop out a bit better. You can see it now. And this time, perhaps what I'll do, okay, my thread stays behind. I think I'll pick up a button. So I have some seashell buttons, and I've just put my crochet hook through into one hole, and I pull the thread through. Whoops. I'm trying to work around the tripod, so it makes me very clumsy. All right, so there, and now the thin thread just goes across to the front, and now I bring the thicker thread across both, and I put a little tension on them at the back, and I lift over and tighten up both strands and work 2 stitches. There we go. You can see the button will now hang down quite nicely. Okay, so I will, let's see, what else do I have in here that would be interesting on here. The beads have to have a hole that's large enough to fit onto the crochet hook. That's essential. And by having, by just picking up each individual bead or button or charm, I get to choose, I get to design my bracelet as I go. If I were to thread the beads and buttons and things on beforehand, I would have to make all those design decisions. Boy, that's hard to say all at once. Before I started the luceting. And so I really like doing it this way because it allows me to make those choices just right while I'm making the bracelet. So this time I'm using a larger shell bead, button, and popping that thread onto the left hand peg, and taking both strands past the right hand peg and lifting it up and over. And now I have to push the button out of the way. It gets in the way for the next set of stitches because it's so big. So the beads and buttons will come to the surface, and they will hang down off of the edge of the luceted cord. So let's see. I'm just rooting around in here. I'm going to put a couple of button beads on at the same time. So I've put 3 beads on at the same time and dropped 2 of them. It's very hard to work around the tripod, but you must forgive me for that. Okay, so there we go. So we'll pop those over the left hand peg, and the thin thread comes to the front. The thicker thread will come around now, thicker yarn, pardon me. And what'll happen is those 3 beads will pop out. There we go. As the bracelet progresses. They'll make a little picot. See? There you go. There's the picot. Hopefully that's showing up. There we go. And then I'll knit a couple more loops, and it's time for a charm. Now, the key has a hole that's big enough that I could actually put both strands of yarn through it, both the thin thread and the thicker yarn. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop that loop that I've pulled through the key onto the left hand peg and take both strands of yarn past the right hand peg and lift the lower loops over the upper. And the key is now captured in the cord. And I like to work at least 2 stitches between each element that I'm adding in. It gives a bit of space then and definition. So since I've put 3 beads on together on one side of the key, I think I'll do that on the other side of the key. Do the same thing. So, oops, one of them fell off. And this time again, these beads being a bit finer than the charm have to go just on the thin thread. So the thin thread goes on first and then goes across in front of the right hand peg and left hand. And so this is how you add buttons, beads, and charms to your luceted cords. As I said before, you can certainly pre-thread a string of beads and then just slide them one at a time up the thinner cord and work the same way that I did with taking the thin cord across and then the thicker cord. So I will just finish luceting up some more cord and show you the wrap bracelet when it's done. Now, so I've worked combinations of large beads, 3 buttons at once, 3 beads at once to give picots. And now what I want to do is to have the beads for this part, like the bracelet will be wrapped around the wrist. So around the arm. So what I want is to have solid beads up this next section. And in order to do that, what I do is I will place, again pulling the thread through the bead by placing the bead on the hook first, and then the thin thread goes through and across, and the thicker thread yarn goes around, and you will lift the left hand lower loop over and the right hand lower loop over and push the bead to the front. And repeat. Pick up a bead on your crochet hook. Oops, I just picked up more than one. Okay, just pick up one bead and just keep repeating. So we're going to do that for every set of 2 stitches so that you get the solid beads working in a chain up the luceted cord, and lower gets lifted over upper, and we push the beads forward and repeat. So I'm just going to carry on with this section of the bracelet by putting one bead on for every time I make that 2 stitch pass. And then I will come back and show you what I've done. Oops, that one didn't come over. Okay. Push that little guy forward. There we go. All right, I'll just make this chain section and be back. So here's the chain section with the beads set into the lucet cord. And for the last section of the bracelet, I'm just going to work it in the plain basic luceted cord. So I will just work a few inches of that because I want the last section of the bracelet to be plain to kind of set off the beaded, buttoned, and charmed section. So that's what I will do with the last part. And so I will carry on working just plain and come back. Oh, maybe what I'll show you too is if you have a bead with the large hole that you want to pull onto your cord and to sit on the outside of the cord, you can simply pop it onto the cord, and you can take the cord through again to secure it, or you can tie a large knot to hold it in place. In this case, we'll just take the cord through again and the end of the yarn, and that will secure it. So that's one way of putting beads onto your luceted cords as well. Or they can just simply slip along the cord. And so I'm going to just finish up this long section and of the plain section, and then come back and show you how it looks. So here's the completed wrap bracelet. Now, of course, her arm, there's no her attached to it, but this arm is thinner than most. So it's wrapped more times around, but you just wrap and tie, and there you go. All your charms, buttons, and beads are all luceted into splendor. Now you can also make a simple bracelet by just making a lucet cord and tying a very simple knot in the middle and putting jewelry finding on the end, and it's a very nice bracelet. You can also make your lucet cord and use it to make a chained cord, which is even bigger, and then that works really well as a bracelet or necklace too. So to do that, you make a loop, fold it over, pull through the long chain, the long cord, reach through the loop, pull up the cord, reach through, pull up. And so that's how you make a chained cord. Now you can use that to decorate or embellish. That it can be stitched onto pillows or blankets or clothing, hats, bags. That's quite decorative. Either side works beautifully for that. And or like I said, it can be worn as a bracelet. So of course you'd have to finish with the working on there. So that's how to embellish your cords, your luceted cord. So happy luceting.